The hardest truth most people never hear inside a gym is this. The body does not reward effort. It rewards signals. Hours spent moving weight from one place to another mean very little if the body does not recognize a clear biological reason to adapt. Muscles, bones, hormones, and the nervous system are not impressed by exhaustion. They respond to precision. When time is wasted, it is rarely because people are lazy. It is because they are chasing fatigue instead of adaptation, motion instead of meaning, and routines instead of understanding how the human body actually decides to grow stronger. Most people believe the body keeps score by counting minutes, that it somehow tallies hours spent sweating under fluorescent lights and rewards those who stay longer with better results. But biology does not work like a time clock. The human body is not impressed by duration. It is persuaded by clarity. At the cellular level, adaptation begins only when a clear and specific signal is delivered, and that signal has far more to do with intensity, precision, and relevance than with how long someone remains in the gym. Muscles are not thinkers. They are responders, and what they respond to is not effort in the emotional sense, but stress in the biological sense, a stress that must cross a certain threshold to be interpreted as meaningful. When a muscle fiber is exposed to a load that challenges its current capacity, even briefly, mechanical tension disrupts its internal structure. This disruption is not damage in a destructive sense, but a carefully monitored disturbance that activates molecular sensors inside the cell. These sensors trigger cascades that increase protein synthesis, strengthen connective tissue, and improve the muscle's ability to generate force in the future. If the stress is too light, these sensors remain quiet. If the stress is too scattered or unfocused, the signal becomes weak and inconsistent. Spending 2 hours lifting weights that never truly challenge a muscle does not amplify the signal. It dilutes it. The body evolved in environments where energy was precious and unnecessary growth was a liability. As a result, it has developed strict rules about when adaptation is worth the cost. Building muscle, strengthening bones, and improving neural efficiency require resources, and the body releases those resources only when it is convinced they are necessary for survival. A short, intense stimulus that clearly threatens the current level of capacity sends a powerful message. Adapt or struggle next time. Long workouts filled with moderate effort send a very different message. This level of function is sufficient. No urgent change required. Intensity, in this context, does not mean chaos or reckless exertion. It means proximity to meaningful effort, the point where the body is forced to recruit higher threshold motor units that it normally keeps in reserve. These motor units are associated with the strongest muscle fibers, the ones most capable of growth and force production. They are not activated by light weights lifted for endless repetitions. They are recruited when the nervous system senses that simpler strategies are no longer enough. This is why a few well-executed sets performed near true capacity can outperform an entire workout spent comfortably below it. Clarity is equally important. The body responds best when the stress placed upon it is simple and unmistakable. A movement performed with control, intention, and full engagement sends a cleaner signal than one performed hastily or mechanically. When form breaks down, tension is redistributed, and the intended tissues no longer receive the message. The body adapts to what it experiences most clearly, not to what the mind believes is training. This is why two people can perform the same exercise for the same duration and achieve vastly different results. One delivers a sharp signal, the other creates noise. Long workouts often create the illusion of productivity because fatigue accumulates. Muscles burn, breathing becomes heavy, and sweat reinforces a feeling that something valuable is happening. But fatigue is not adaptation. Fatigue is simply a byproduct of energy depletion and metabolite buildup. It can occur without meaningful mechanical tension, without sufficient motor unit recruitment, and without any lasting signal to grow stronger. The body can become very tired without becoming any more capable. In fact, chronic fatigue can suppress adaptation by elevating stress hormones that interfere with recovery and tissue repair. There is also a neurological cost to excessive duration. The nervous system is responsible for coordinating movement, generating force, and maintaining technique. As sessions drag on, neural efficiency declines. Signals become less precise, reaction time slow, and coordination deteriorates. At this point, additional repetitions reinforce poor movement patterns rather than improving performance. Instead of teaching the body how to produce force efficiently, long sessions often teach it how to compensate. Over time, this increases injury risk while delivering minimal benefit. From a hormonal perspective, short and intense training sessions tend to create a more favorable environment for adaptation. They briefly elevate anabolic signals that support tissue growth and repair. Prolonged sessions, especially when poorly structured, can push the body toward a catabolic state, where breakdown exceeds rebuilding. This does not mean hormones are magical switches, but they do reflect the body's interpretation of stress. A clear, bounded challenge followed by rest is interpreted as productive. Endless stress without resolution is interpreted as a threat. The misunderstanding around duration is deeply cultural. Many people equate discipline with suffering and believe that more time invested must automatically yield more reward. This mindset ignores how finely tuned biological systems are. The body is efficient to the point of ruthlessness. It will not overdeliver simply because someone stayed longer. It will do the minimum required to handle the demands placed upon it. If those demands never increase in a meaningful way, neither will the body's capabilities. Precision also allows recovery to occur more completely. When sessions are shorter and more focused, the damage inflicted is specific rather than widespread. This allows repair processes to target the exact tissues that need reinforcement. Recovery becomes faster and more complete, making it possible to apply another high-quality stimulus sooner. Long, exhaustive sessions scatter stress across multiple systems, extending recovery time without providing proportional benefit. The result is fewer effective training days and slower progress despite greater time investment. There's a quiet elegance in understanding that strength is built not through punishment, but through conversation with the body. Each workout is a sentence spoken in the language of stress. If the sentence is clear and concise, the body understands exactly what is being asked of it. If the sentence is long, rambling, and repetitive, the meaning is lost. Duration without intention becomes biological chatter, easily ignored. This perspective also reshapes how progress is measured. Instead of counting minutes or exercises, attention shifts to the quality of effort and the body's response over time. Strength increases, movements feel more stable, recovery improves, and daily life becomes easier. These changes reflect genuine adaptation, rather than temporary exhaustion. The gym becomes a place of communication, rather than consumption, where less time produces more meaningful results because the message being delivered is finally clear. When intensity and clarity replace duration as the guiding principles of training, time is no longer wasted trying to convince the body through repetition. A small number of well-chosen challenges becomes enough to trigger profound change. The body listens, responds, and adapts, not because it was overwhelmed, but because it was spoken to the language it has understood for thousands of years, a language rooted in necessity, efficiency, and survival, where every adaptation has a cost and every signal must justify that cost before the body agrees to change. When people think about strength, they picture muscle fibers thickening, arms growing larger, and bodies becoming visibly more powerful. Yet long before any of that happens, strength is negotiated inside the nervous system. The first and most decisive adaptations to training occur not in the muscle itself, but in the way the brain learns to command it. Every movement begins as an electrical conversation, signals traveling from the brain to the spinal cord into motor neurons that activate muscle fibers. Until that conversation becomes efficient, coordinated, and confident, muscle size remains a secondary factor. In the early stages of training, gains in strength often appear without any visible change in muscle mass. This confuses many people, but it is a direct reflection of neural adaptation. The nervous system learns how to recruit a greater percentage of available muscle fibers, how to synchronize their firing, and how to reduce unnecessary interference from opposing muscles. In simple terms, the body learns how to use what it already has. A muscle that once operated at partial capacity begins to express more of its potential, not because it grew larger, but because the brain learned how to access it more completely. Most gym time is wasted because this neurological dimension of strength is ignored. Movement are performed on autopilot, attention drifts, and repetitions are completed without deliberate intent. The nervous system thrives on focus and clarity. When attention is present, the brain refines its motor maps, strengthening the pathways that control precise movement. When attention is absent, The brain defaults to crude, inefficient patterns that get the job done but leave potential untapped. This is why two individuals with similar physiques can demonstrate vastly different strength levels. One has trained their nervous system. The other has merely accumulated fatigue. Mind-muscle connection is often dismissed as a motivational phrase, but it describes a real neurological process. When an individual consciously attends to a movement, cortical areas involved in motor control become more active. This heightened activity improves signal quality, allowing for more precise recruitment of muscle fibers. Over time, repeated focused practice strengthens these neural pathways through a process known as synaptic plasticity. The brain physically changes in response to how movements are practiced, refining its ability to generate force efficiently. As training intensity increases, the role of the nervous system becomes even more pronounced. High levels of force require the recruitment of fast-twitch muscle fibers, which are governed by high-threshold motor units. These motor units are not easily activated. The nervous system must be confident that maximum effort is required before it releases them. This confidence is built through repeated exposure to challenging, well-controlled efforts. Random, unfocused training fails to establish this trust. The nervous system remains conservative, holding back its most powerful resources. There's also a protective aspect to neural control. The brain constantly evaluates risk, inhibiting force production if it senses instability, poor coordination, or unfamiliar movement patterns. This is why technique matters more than ego. When movement are stable and predictable, the nervous system relaxes its protective restraints, allowing greater force output. When movement are chaotic or rushed, inhibitory signals increase, limiting strength regardless of muscle size. Time spent perfecting movement quality often unlocks strength that was already present but neurologically inaccessible. Fatigue complicates this relationship further. As the nervous system becomes tired, its ability to coordinate movement deteriorates. Reaction time slow, motor unit firing becomes less synchronized, and technique breaks down. Continuing to train in this state reinforces poor neural patterns. Instead of teaching the brain how to generate force efficiently, it learns how to survive under fatigue. While endurance has its place, strength development depends on fresh, high-quality neural output. This is why shorter, more focused sessions often produce better strength gains than long workouts that push deep into exhaustion. The nervous system also adapts on multiple timescales. Some changes occur quickly within a single session as neural drive increases and inhibition decreases. Other changes unfold over weeks and months as motor pathways become more robust. These adaptations are highly specific. The nervous system becomes good at what it practices. Strength gained through controlled, deliberate movements transfers more effectively to real-world tasks than strength gained through careless repetition. The brain does not generalize well. It specializes based on experience. This specialization explains why variety must be introduced thoughtfully. Constantly changing exercises prevents the nervous system from refining any single pattern. While novelty can stimulate interest, excessive variation keeps the brain in a perpetual learning phase, never allowing mastery to develop. On the other hand, repeating the same movements with attention and progressive challenge allows neural efficiency to accumulate. Over time, movements feel smoother, more confident, and more powerful, not because the muscles have dramatically changed, but because the brain has optimized its control. Breathing, posture, and tension management further illustrate the nervous system's central role. Proper breathing patterns influence the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic activity, affecting readiness and control. Postural stability provides a nervous system with a sense of safety, reducing inhibitory signals. Even the way tension is distributed across the body affects force production. Excessive tension in non-working muscles creates interference, while appropriate tension enhances coordination. These factors are neural in nature, shaping how force is expressed rather than how much muscle exists. Understanding strength as a nervous system skill changes the relationship people have with training. Progress becomes less about chasing a pump or soreness, and more about cultivating awareness and control. Each repetition becomes an opportunity to teach the brain something valuable. The gym transforms from a place of blind effort into a laboratory of movement, where attention is a primary tool and force is the outcome of refined communication between mind and body. This perspective also fosters patience. Neural adaptations require consistency and quality, not impatience. Rushing progress by adding weight without control often stalls development because the nervous system responds by increasing inhibition. Respecting the learning process allows strength to emerge organically, layer on top of a foundation of efficient neural control. Muscles grow in response to demand, but demand must first be expressed clearly through the nervous system. When strength is understood this way, wasted time becomes obvious. Endless sets performed without focus do little to train the brain. In contrast, fewer sets performed with intent can produce profound changes in how the body moves and feels. Strength. Strength becomes something that is embodied rather than forced, expressed through confident, coordinated action rather than raw size. The nervous system, once trained to trust the body and access its full capacity, allows muscles to perform at a level that once seemed unreachable, revealing that true strength was never missing, only unlearned, waiting for the brain to give it permission to emerge. Most people believe progress is made in the gym, in the moment of strain, when muscles burn and breathing becomes heavy. Yet from a biological perspective, that moment is only the opening chapter. Training is the act of disruption. It creates a controlled disturbance that signals the body that its current level of capacity may no longer be sufficient. What follows, quietly and invisibly, is where progress actually takes shape. Recovery is not passive rest. It is an active, highly organized process during which the body interprets the stress experienced and decides how much adaptation is worth investing in. At the cellular level, intense physical effort creates micro-level disruptions in muscle fibers, connective tissue, and energy systems. These disruptions are not problems to be avoided. They are the very reason adaptation begins. The body responds by mobilizing repair mechanisms that reinforce the affected structures, making them more resilient to future stress. However, this response requires time, nutrients, and hormonal conditions that support rebuilding rather than continued breakdown. When recovery is insufficient, these repair processes remain incomplete, and the signal from training fades before it can be fully translated into adaptation. Sleep is one of the most underestimated components of this process. During deep sleep, the body shifts into a state that favors tissue repair, immune function, and hormonal regulation. Growth-related signals become more pronounced, while stress-related activity decreases. Neural connections formed during training are consolidated, refining movement patterns and reinforcing learning. When sleep is compromised, these processes are disrupted. The body may still attempt to adapt, but the quality of that adaptation declines, and progress slows despite continued effort. Nutrition provides the raw materials required for recovery. Proteins supply amino acids for tissue repair, carbohydrates replenish energy stores, and fats support hormonal balance and cellular integrity. Micronutrients play subtle but essential roles in enzymatic reactions that govern repair and adaptation. When nutrition is inadequate or poorly timed, the body is forced to prioritize survival over optimization. It may repair enough to function, but not enough to grow stronger. Training without proper nourishment is like issuing construction orders without delivering materials. Mental state also influences recovery more than most people realize. Chronic psychological stress elevates hormonal signals that favor energy conservation and tissue breakdown. These signals interfere with the rebuilding process, even if physical stress is well managed. The body does not distinguish sharply between physical and emotional threats. It integrates all forms of stress into a single assessment of safety. When life stress remains high, the body becomes cautious, limiting adaptation regardless of how well-designed the training program may be. One of the most common mistakes in fitness culture is the belief that more training will compensate for poor recovery. In reality, excessive training without adequate recovery compounds a problem. Each session adds to the stress load, while the body's capacity to process that load diminishes. Over time, performance plateaus or declines, injuries become more likely, and motivation erodes. This is not a failure of discipline. It is a predictable outcome of biological overload. The concept of supercompensation illustrates why timing matters. After a training stimulus, the body initially enters a state of reduced capacity due to fatigue and disruption. With sufficient recovery, it rebounds to a level slightly above baseline, preparing for future challenges. Training again too soon interrupts this process, while waiting too long allows the adaptation to fade. Effective progress requires a rhythm that aligns stress and recovery, allowing each to enhance the other. Connective tissues, such as tendons and ligaments, adapt more slowly than muscles. They require consistent loading followed by ample recovery to increase their strength and resilience. When training frequency or intensity outpaces their ability to recover, pain and injury emerge. This is often misinterpreted as weakness or poor genetics, when in fact it reflects a mismatch between stress and recovery. Respecting the slower pace of connective tissue adaptation preserves long-term function and supports sustainable strength. Recovery also encompasses active processes that support circulation, mobility, and nervous system regulation. Light movement increases blood flow, delivering nutrients to recovering tissues and removing metabolic byproducts. Gentle mobility work maintains joint health and reinforces movement quality without adding significant stress. Breathing practices and moments of stillness help recalibrate the nervous system, shifting it toward a state that supports repair rather than vigilance. Understanding recovery as an integral part of training changes how effort is valued. Rest days become purposeful rather than indulgent. Sleep becomes a performance tool rather than a luxury. Nutrition becomes strategic rather than incidental. The body is no longer treated as a machine that must be driven harder, but as an intelligent system that responds best when stress is paired with care. This perspective fosters a more compassionate relationship with the body. Instead of interpreting fatigue as a moral failure, it is recognized as feedback. Instead of ignoring discomfort, it becomes information about recovery capacity. Progress becomes a dialogue rather than a demand, shaped by listening as much as by effort. When recovery is honored, training sessions become sharper and more effective. The body arrives prepared to deliver high-quality effort, and the signals sent during training are clearer and more impactful. Over time, this leads to steady improvement without the cycle of burnout and frustration that plagues many well-intentioned individuals. Strength and resilience emerge not from constant strain, but from the balance between challenge and restoration, where each period of effort is followed by sufficient space for the body to rebuild itself into something more capable than it was before. The human body did not evolve in fragments. It was shaped by survival demands that required coordination, balance, and a seamless transfer of force across joints and tissues. Long before exercise machines existed, movement meant interacting with the environment in integrated ways. Lifting, carrying, reaching, climbing, twisting, and stabilizing under unpredictable conditions. These actions train the body as a unified system rather than a collection of isolated parts. When training ignores this reality, time is often spent strengthening pieces while weakening the whole. Movement patterns are the language through which the nervous system organizes the body. A push is not merely the extension of the arms. It is a coordinated effort involving the feet pressing into the ground, the core stabilizing the spine, the shoulders aligning, and the hands transmitting force. When a movement is trained as a pattern, all these elements learn to cooperate. When muscles are isolated artificially, that cooperation is disrupted. Strength becomes local rather than global, impressive in appearance but limited in application. Joint health depends heavily on how forces are distributed. Natural movement patterns allow stress to be shared across multiple joints and tissues, reducing the burden on any single structure. Isolated exercises often concentrate load in narrow ranges of motion, repeatedly stressing the same tissues while neglecting others. Over time, this creates imbalances. Some muscles become overdeveloped and tight, while others remain underactive and weak. The body compensates, but compensation is not optimization. It is a temporary solution that increases wear and tear. The spine, in particular, thrives on coordinated movement. It is designed to transmit force while remaining stable, supported by surrounding musculature that adjusts dynamically. Integrated patterns teach the body how to protect the spine under load by distributing tension appropriately. Isolated movements that ignore this relationship can leave the spine unsupported during real-world tasks, where force rarely acts on a single joint in isolation. Training patterns that respect spinal mechanics builds resilience that carries beyond the gym. Balance and proprioception are also products of pattern-based training. When the body moves as a unit, Sensory feedback from muscles, joints, and connective tissue informs the nervous system about position and movement. This feedback refines coordination and enhances stability. Machine-based isolation often removes these demands, stabilizing the body externally. While this can be useful in specific contexts, over-reliance on such methods deprives the nervous system of valuable information, slowing the development of true control. Energy efficiency improves when movement patterns are trained consistently. The body learns to transfer force smoothly from one segment to another, minimizing energy leaks. This efficiency is not only beneficial for performance, but also for longevity. Movements that waste energy tend to place excess strain on tissues, accelerating fatigue and increasing injury risk. Integrated training teaches the body to move economically, conserving resources while producing effective force. Natural patterns also encourage symmetry. Many daily activities require alternating or unilateral actions, challenging the body to stabilize and produce force asymmetrically. Pattern-based training exposes imbalances that isolation often hides. Addressing these imbalances improves coordination and reduces the risk of overuse injuries. Strength becomes more evenly distributed, supporting the body as a whole rather than favoring dominant muscles or sides. The psychological experience of training changes as well. Integrated movements demand presence. They require attention to balance, timing, and rhythm. This engagement strengthens the mind-body connection and enhances learning. Isolation exercises, by contrast, can become repetitive and disengaging, encouraging mental drift. While they may produce local fatigue, they often fail to cultivate the awareness necessary for skilled movement. From a developmental perspective, movement patterns align with how humans learn to move from infancy. Crawling, standing, walking, and running all involve coordinated patterns that build upon each other. These patterns form the foundation of later movement abilities. Training that revisits and reinforces them respects the body's natural learning process. Isolation, when overemphasized, interrupts this continuity, layering artificial demands onto a foundation that was never fully integrated. This does not mean isolation has no place. Targeted work can be valuable for rehabilitation or addressing specific weaknesses. However, when isolation becomes a primary focus, it inverts the natural hierarchy of movement. The body functions as a system first, with individual components serving the system's goals. Training should reflect this order. Patterns provide context. Muscles provide contribution. When movement patterns are prioritized, strength becomes transferable. The ability to push, pull, hinge, squat, rotate, and carry with control translates into daily life and diverse physical challenges. The body feels capable rather than fragile, adaptable rather than restricted. Training time becomes more efficient because each movement teaches multiple systems simultaneously, delivering a richer stimulus with fewer exercises. Over time, this approach fosters a sense of coherence within the body. Movements feel connected rather than disjointed. Effort flows through the body instead of stalling at weak links. Pain that once emerged from imbalance often diminishes as coordination improves. The body learns not just to be strong, but to be organized. When training aligns with natural movement patterns, the gym ceases to be a place where parts are built in isolation and becomes a place where the body rehearses its role as an integrated whole. Time is no longer spent polishing individual components at the expense of function. Instead, each session reinforces the relationships that allow strength to express itself safely and effectively, honoring the way the human body was designed to move, adapt, and endure across the varied demands of life. The human body is deeply conservative in how it adapts. It does not respond enthusiastically to bursts of enthusiasm or dramatic promises made on days of high motivation. It responds to patterns. At the biological level, rhythm creates trust. When a stimulus appears regularly, the body begins to treat it as a permanent feature of the environment rather than a temporary disruption. This distinction matters more than most people realize, because the body allocates resources differently depending on whether it believes demand is short-lived or enduring. Motivation is an emotional state, shaped by mood, energy, external validation, and expectation. It rises and falls unpredictably. Biology, however, does not operate on emotion. It operates on probability. When stress appears inconsistently, the body hedges its response. It adapts just enough to cope in the short term, avoiding deeper structural change that would consume energy unnecessarily. This is why sporadic bursts of intense training often lead to soreness without lasting improvement. The body assumes the demand will disappear, as it always has before. Consistency changes that assumption. When the same type of stress appears again and again, the body begins to interpret it as a stable requirement. At that point, adaptation becomes economical. Instead of repeatedly repairing damage, the body invests in prevention. Muscles strengthen not merely to recover, but to reduce future disruption. Tendons thicken, bones reinforce, neural pathways streamline. These changes are not dramatic or immediate, but they are durable because they are built on expectation rather than reaction. This is also why smaller, repeatable efforts often outperform heroic but irregular ones. A moderate stimulus applied consistently sends a clearer signal than an extreme stimulus applied occasionally. The body prefers manageable demands that it can plan around. Excessive stress triggers protective mechanisms that limit adaptation, while consistent stress within tolerance encourages the body to expand that tolerance gradually. Progress becomes less volatile and more predictable. Habit formation plays a critical role in this process. When training becomes habitual, it requires less cognitive effort. Decision fatigue diminishes, and the behavior becomes automatic. This matters because willpower is a limited resource, while habits operate with minimal cost. From a physiological standpoint, reduced mental friction lowers overall stress, freeing resources for physical adaptation. The body experiences training as part of normal life rather than an emergency event. Consistency also stabilizes the nervous system. Repeated exposure to familiar movements reduces uncertainty. The brain learns what to expect and how to respond efficiently. This reduces unnecessary muscular tension and improves coordination. Strength becomes smoother, more confident, and less taxing. In contrast, irregular training keeps the nervous system in a constant state of relearning, preventing refinement and increasing the likelihood of compensation. There is also a hormonal dimension to rhythm. Regular activity helps regulate circadian cycles, insulin sensitivity, and stress responses. The body synchronizes internal processes around predictable physical demands. This synchronization supports recovery, energy availability, and mood stability. Inconsistent training disrupts this alignment, forcing the body to continually recalibrate. The result is often fatigue that feels disproportionate to effort. Many people mistake motivation for commitment. Motivation feels powerful, but it is unstable. Commitment, expressed through consistent action, is quiet and unremarkable. Biology favors the unremarkable. It responds best to signals that arrive without drama. A body that encounters stress calmly and repeatedly learns that it must adapt calmly and permanently. There is no urgency, no resistance, only adjustment. This perspective reframes discipline. Discipline is not about forcing action when motivation is absent. It is about designing behavior that does not require motivation to function. When training sessions are simple, time-efficient, and repeatable, consistency becomes natural. The body benefits not because each session is extraordinary, but because none of them are skipped often enough to break the pattern. Consistency also protects against injury. Sudden spikes in activity place tissues under stress they are unprepared to handle. Gradual, regular loading allows tissues to strengthen in parallel with demand. This parallel development preserves joint integrity and connective tissue health. The body adapts evenly rather than unevenly, reducing weak points that fail under sudden pressure. Psychologically, consistent practice builds trust between mind and body. The body learns that effort will not be excessive or unpredictable. The mind learns that progress does not require emotional intensity. This trust reduces anxiety around training and performance. Effort becomes calmer, more deliberate, and more sustainable. Over time, consistent action reshapes identity. Training stops being something a person tries to do and becomes something they simply do. This shift matters because identity-aligned behaviors persist even when circumstances change. The body responds to this persistence by embedding adaptation more deeply. Strength becomes part of baseline function rather than a temporary peak. The most profound adaptations occur not at the edge of exhaustion, but within the steady accumulation of effort. The body evolves quietly, layering improvement upon improvement, as long as the signal remains present. Missed sessions matter less than broken patterns. What the body remembers is frequency, not intensity spikes. When consistency guides training, progress feels less dramatic but more real. There are fewer extremes, fewer setbacks, and fewer illusions. The body adapts because it expects to be challenged again and again and again. It prepares itself not for a single moment of effort, but for a future where strength is required as a normal condition of life, responding not to excitement or ambition, but to rhythm, repetition, and the simple certainty that the demand is not going away.